Right, weekend waffle time. So what I want to talk about here are magazines and how in the late 80s and early 90s they were so incredibly important for almost the culture of video games, because I think now we can look back at the games that came out almost from a historical perspective, that these are the games that people talk about now. You can see the reviews of them and see people playing them, but it seemed to be we all share this, all these people of a certain age sort of share this culture and these little anecdotes and know where the games came from and the politics and blah 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 blah. But I think a lot of this stemmed from these magazines. So at least in my case, I used to read CVG magazine and Mean Machines and Mean Machines Sega later on, and those kind of magazines, and even ST format and Amiga format. And I think the magazines were so important for almost the time or the spaces between the games. The expectations, the looking forward to something else to come out. The Sonic 2 coming out and being teased with information. It's just fantastic, and I'm sure if you were around at that time and read these magazines, you'll know what I'm talking about. But what I've recently come across, and this is the real reason for making this video, is a website called retropdfs.wordpress.com. and what this guy's done is he's not necessarily scanned the magazines, but he's acquired scans of magazines, and he's gone and done an OCR, so the text in the magazines is fully searchable. But I think he's got a lot of these from the Internet Archive, so it's really not just this website. There are other websites doing it, but this was really just a focal point. That there are scans of CVG magazine, Mean Machine magazine, Mean Machine Sega, CU Amiga. He's not got ST format or Amiga format yet, but he's got Crash magazine, Zap 64. These old magazines that you can just go back and read again, and that's brilliant. And I think we should just show this. Yeah. So let's turn the camera around. Okay, this is Mean Machines from October 1990. So this was their first issue, and Mean Machines was a spin-off from CVG magazine, and it focused, as you can see here on the left, it focused on consoles. So the ones they were looking at were the Master System, the Mega Drive, which I think had just come out in the UK, the Amstrad GX4000. I think they might have been scraping the bottom of the barrel there. I don't recall that being around for very long. And the original NES. And as you can see here, Turtles was the flavour of the day for, although I think it was perhaps popular for a couple of years in the UK. And we've got this character on the right, which is Julian Ringle, who I think he was the lead reviewer. He might have been the editor as well, I can't remember. But yeah, the guys that were involved with this were Julian Ringle and Richard Leadbeater, who later went on to review for the official Sega magazine, which was also very good. So yeah, this issue is quite interesting, just to look at the presentation for anything. It's so very almost informal and cartoony. Let's scroll down. Oh yeah, the Game Boy. Wow. So it's £80 for a NES in the UK. I've only ever played on a NES once. That was about 1995. Yeah. So these are the reviewers. And Ninja Gaiden. So this was issue 0. Yeah, Genesis, Robocop. Oh right, this is interesting. At this point, games came out in Japan a lot earlier than they did in the UK. So here they're looking at Famitsu magazine, and it looks like that's a Dragon Quest game. It's probably Dragon Quest 4, 5, something like that, so it might have been the last one on the NES. But what they have got, ooh, Impossible Mission, I like that game, is, wow, Hellfire. So yeah, so they're talking about this game first coming out in Japan in the arcades. This game was really popular among shoot-'em-up fans for the Mega Drive when it first came out. There was that and Guinaug, which are really nice launch games for the Mega Drive. R-Type 2, Ghouls and Ghosts, I forget the name of it. There's two different ones. Total Recall, that really dates it. Revenge of Shinobi. Yeah, I remember this game later on coming out on the Mega CD as a pack-in game. So it was like an arcade collection. And I remember this, feeling that this game was very dated on the Mega CD because it wasn't really what I was expecting. But when this first came out on the Mega Drive, this was one of the first arcade quality games. So nice big screenshots, really nice, and it got 94%. What's this? Looks like a MAME cabinet, but it can't be. Active. Would you like to own an arcade machine for less than £300? Yes, I would. 16-bit Mega Drive. Awesome. Yeah, this was interesting. The rivalry between Nintendo and Sega was quite almost petty in a way. They'd slag each other off in adverts. Silent Service for the NES. I think I played this on the Atari ST. Yeah, these are always entertaining looking at the supplies. Impossible Mission on the Master System. I really must get hold of this because I love the was it Mission Impossible 1 or 2? I'm talking rubbish. Impossible Mission. Nothing to do with the film. Impossible Mission on the Atari ST. That was brilliant. I think it was the C64 version where it says, "Stay a while, stay forever," in some speech. Right, Commodore Amiga Turtle Pack. Mega Man 2. Yeah, this was quite an odd thing. This was being reviewed in the UK in October 1990, and I seem to recall this game came out years before, originally, in Japan and the US, and it just shows how long it took for us to get these games in the UK. In this issue there's also a review of, where was it? It's Super Mario 2, Altered Beast. Wow. Let's go down. Wonder Boy 3. It's just so strange to see these games being reviewed for the first time. We're so used to thinking them as retro games. People comment on them with 20 years worth of history between then and now, but just seeing what they thought of it then. I mean, this one, they were comparing it against the arcade game which had only come out a few years ago, and Super Mario Land. Not Super Mario Land, Super Monster Land. I'm getting confused with all the different names for Monster World and Monster Land, but none of them have got anything to do with Mario, so yeah, 95%. I'd agree with that. Golden Axe. Yeah, it's easy to think of the Mega Drive now as being, just another 16-bit console, and not that much better than the Master System, but when it came out, it was really the first console that had arcade quality graphics on a home machine. Certainly better than the C64 or the ST, and perhaps, yeah, it could be comparable to the Amiga, but it certainly had its fair share of arcade games from Sega. And you just look at the reviews, I like that mega game. And as a kid reading these, you're thinking, wow, this is really is arcade quality. And games like this and Super Hang-On now, you know, they were early Mega Drive games. They do look dated, but reading this as a kid, this is fantastic with these big screenshots. Mean Yob. Yeah, this developed over time. It was a question and answer thing. So you write your letters in, and he gives you very sarcastic answers. Where's the Mario review? Indiana Jones. Mega Drive Top 10, Golden Axe, Ghouls and Ghosts, Revenge of Shinobi, Thunder Force 2, Thunderblade. Yeah, these all became bargain basement Mega Drive games, and they're nearly all arcade. Yeah, Super Mario 2. It's quite strange to see this, because as with Mega Man, I seem to remember this came out in Japan and the US in 85, and this has been reviewed in 1990, and Super Mario World, Super Mario 4, came out 91, so the UK had to catch up with Mario 2, Mario 3, and then Mario World a few years later. Yeah, Mario 3 coming soon. Yeah, it says in Japan, work has already begun on Super Mario 4, which is Super Mario World. So yeah, I don't know what happened with Nintendo, whether they just had to cram in a load of releases very quickly. I don't remember the NES being very popular in the UK. I mean, certainly myself, I was not interested in it. I had, you know, access to a Commodore 64, and I just thought, what's the point in a computer that doesn't have a keyboard? I later was swayed. Yeah, Turtles. Yeah, I think that's it for Moonwalker. Ooh, Ghouls and Ghosts. Yeah. Yeah, this was a nice game. So what did they give it? Is this a review or a preview? I mean, this looks lovely compared to what we had on the C64. BBC, nice big screenshots. You can tell they've not been video captured, that these are, I don't know if these are photographed from a television or something like that, but certainly, you know, 10 years later or 5 years later, the quality of the screenshots went up. $44.99. That was incredibly expensive. I remember buying Sinclair Spectrum games for £2–3, so 92%. PC Engine. I don't recall this coming out in the UK. Looking back over these magazines, they do cover a few PC Engine games, but I don't ever recall seeing one on a shelf anywhere. It must just be a scarce thing to get. Yeah, Super Hang-On. And just look at the size of the sprites on this. You know, this really is arcade quality. Yeah. Right, let's switch over. Right, this is a bit of an oddity, and I noticed this having looked through some of these issues. So this is March 1991 of CVG magazine, and you see down here on the Famicom, which is the Super Nintendo, it should be the Super Famicom, is Super Mario World. And it's interesting here, they've got the review. I mean, as a kid, who wouldn't want to play this? This looks brilliant, and all, you know, all the nice Japanese artwork. But there's a reference down here, and it's saying thanks to Console Concepts for the loan of the cartridge. So I'm not sure here if they were talking about the Japanese release, because in Mean Machines, this is from February 92, so this is a year later. They're talking about Super Mario 4, which is Super Mario World. So I don't know if Mean Machines was either late with this review, which seems strange for it being a year later, or whether it was just a case where we got the game a year after Japan did. I remember reading this particular issue, and this is a fairly sad anecdote, that when I used to go to school, there was myself and a few other children, and one of the girls that that we knew at the time from the school, she had a little dog, and she was walking it at the weekend, and the dog stepped out in front of the road in front of an articulated lorry. And I remember reading this magazine, hearing this story, and having these two thoughts in my mind of, wow, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen, and hearing this sad story of this girl who'd, you know, lost a dog to an articulated lorry, which is awful. It really is. Yeah. Wow, this really was a long review. It was about, you know, 5 pages. I remember just looking at it thinking, this looks amazing, look at the sprites, look at the colours, I must play this game, and they even gave it 98%. And I don't think I ever played it until I saw my Mega Drive and bought a SNES, and that must have been about 3-4 years later, something like that. So this was definitely the first game I got hold of. Right, okay. Yeah, I think it's interesting looking at the Mega CD from a time when there was great expectation, and you can see here, you know, all the Japanese around it. This was when it first came out in Japan, and this was, you know, for people that remember it, this was the next, you know, big evolution in games, having CD-ROM, and you know, this was every kid's dream. And you can see here they're playing it off against the SNES. You know, the Mega Drive, it has a CD and it's better than the SNES and can do everything that the SNES does. And it was a little bit of a disappointment in a way. It could and it should have been better, but I just think the developers were sidetracked with all the FMV. And you can see here this Super NES CD that never came out. This ended up being the PlayStation. The Wonder Mega, I remember that. I don't think it ever came out in the UK. This was by Victor. This was one of a few clones of the Mega CD and Mega Drive, so it was an all-in-one unit. And there was one in the UK called the, oh, what was it? Not the CD32. It was something like the CDX, something like that, which was a little. It was like a little Sony Discman, but it was a Mega Drive and a Mega CD. But these were the earlier ones. There was the Wonder Mega and the XI in the US. Yeah. So this is Mean Machines. Sega. So this is the first time when they decided to go only Sega. So Mega Drive, Sonic 2, Mega CD, Prince of Persia, and Master System. That had Prince of Persia 2. Yeah, this came with a video cassette. I remember that very well. Final Fight, James Bond, Prince of Persia. So that, yeah, this was the Master System version, which was ported by a DOM-ARC, which was totally different than the Mega CD version. And I think, personally, I prefer this one. I think this is the best version on the Sega. So, yeah. Mega Drive is not Mega Drive against Mega CD. You can see how we were almost seduced by the, you know, the promise or the premise of the Mega CD having all these, you know, amazing looking graphics, but from the magazines it's hard to tell just how the games play. What review did they give it? I mean, this was a classic example of a game that was really just full motion video, and you've got to remember to press left or right or shoot in a particular place. 73. I'm surprised it gave such a high playability. Yeah. Prince of Persia. This was another one of those launch games which, I mean, I've looked at this in a previous video, wasn't really that much of a step over existing generation graphics. I mean, it just looks like a Mega Drive game, but with some full motion video and animatics and things like that. Yeah. Oh, and Sonic 2. Yeah, I remember this. And the Mega CD Sonic update. This was a bit weird because if you look back, they're not talking about Sonic CD, they're talking about a CD version of Sonic 2 which never came out. Yeah, these look like the beta screenshots because this on the left here is... this tile screen's totally different than the real game. Right, the thing I'll finish with are, oh, as you can see, Terminator. I think in the early 90s and late 80s there were certain sort of adult franchises like Terminator and Aliens and Predator that seemed to stick in almost a collective consciousness, and oh, and RoboCop as well. And I always thought it was just that these films rather were particularly good and you know, stuck in your mind. But looking back at these magazines, you can just see how much of this stuff we had shoved down our throats. I mean, not that it's a bad thing, but if you think these games were, you know, played by children and magazines were read by children because of that. Sure, there were adults playing games, but I'm sure there were a lot more children playing them and reading these magazines, because you just look at this Terminator and Terminator 2, Arnie, Terminator 1. You know, all the games were, you know, as a kid, wow, you know, you probably couldn't see the films at the cinema, but you could certainly play the games or get them on VHS. Terminator 2, CVG. What have we got there? Yeah, I love the artwork on this. So you can tell what was popular at the time. Alien, Terminators. I don't know if these were drawn by kids. I suspect they probably were. You know, RoboCop. You know, you were a kid at school, you'd be drawing Sonic, RoboCop, Mario, Terminator. What else have we got? Wonder Mega, Special Reserve. I'll come back to that. Yeah, I mean, Mario, Terminator. That is cool. More Terminator. Man, these really had a thing for Terminator. Yeah, I mean, you can imagine a kid drawing these sorts of things at school and having, you know, these 18-rated film characters in them. Sonic 2, which this would have been September 92, and reviewing Alien 3, and actually that was a pretty good game on the Mega Drive. 89%, maybe not quite worth that. RoboCop 2. I like the Ed 209. But yeah, I mean, you could see as a kid, you know, you're reading all these magazines and all this stuff, you know, all these characters, Terminator and whatnot, you know, you can see how it makes an impression. I mean, it certainly did on me. Looking back, you know, I think, yeah, I was 10 years old at the time, and in the playgrounds, this is what we were talking about. So this would have come from Mean Machines, February 92, so a few months back. RoboCop, Navy SEALs. So back to the Terminator. What was this on the NES? So T2 and Fantasia. No. No, that's definitely not the right thing. Yeah. What else have they got in this issue? I think that's probably it for the Terminator stuff. But they had... which one was it? CVG. I remember this from a kid. This was a review for Terminator 2, but they had this art competition, and you had to design a new Terminator. And I remember this. It can have... This is the Series 1300 that has invisibility, enhanced transmutation, capabilities to the T1000, runtime speed, kill efficiency. You know, as a kid you're reading this thinking, wow. But I'm sure some of this ended up in Terminator 3, the TX or whatever the model was. So I remember seeing the films and thinking back to this. Yeah. I don't know where this artwork came from. I think this is this stuff here. I think this is from the one-shot comic, the Dark Horse comic. So yeah. Yeah, I think looking at this, it all makes sense now why, you know, these franchises really have stuck in my mind, and other people's too. And I think it's just a case, you know, not only were we reading about Sonic, but we were being introduced to all these films, these, you know, classic genre-defining, well, not really genre-defining, you know, action films from the early 90s. So, right, I think I'll leave it there. I'm sure this video's gone on for a long time. So if you've got any comments or stories that you'd like to share, or magazines that you think are worth having a look at, then please comment below. And these, as I said before, these came from a guy from a website called Retro PDF at WordPress, and he's taken scans from all over the internet that include Internet Archive, which is where I think he got these CVG issues from, and he's done some optical character recognition so you can search them, which is great. And yeah, something to put on the tablet and take to work on the train, I think. Thanks for watching.